saw little holes going through my wall. So I ran to my dad's room and I said, they're shooting. My dad ran out with a gun. Right after that, this dude hung himself in the cell with a television cable. I said, you gotta whack people, you know, if you're gonna be in this. And he died. Hey folks, my name's Rene Enriquez and you are watching Uncensored. I'm here right after my dropping out of the Mexican Mafia. I contact Chris Blatchford and we talk about writing a book, and he comes in with this camera as big as a bus, right? There's a big old camera sitting on a tripod right in front of me, and we're just having a casual conversation. Richard Valdemar jumps in, Sergeant Richard Valdemar jumps in, and we start having that conversation. This is the stuff that went into the best-selling book, The Black Hand, The Bloody Rise and Redemption of a Mexican Mob Killer, Boxer Enriquez. That's the title of the book, right? Some of you have read it, some of you haven't. I'm reading actually chapter by chapter on the channel, but this is the behind the scenes, and I'll give you the anecdotes as we play the interview. With that said, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and hi. Here we are, and I think it's the 17th installment of this series. The conversation that was recorded by Chris Blatchford.
We got you up to high school here, and hey, if you want to go, tell me.
Well,
You know,
as long as we can go, let's go.
You're out of Las Pedrinas. You're back at home. You're smoking dope and selling dope, and you're still in school, and you drop out, and you're not working anymore.
Not working anymore.
So by the time you're 15, you're not the working.
Yeah, it's about 15. About that period, I'm only attending maybe one class. I'm dropping out of school, and I'm just hanging out with the homeboys or hanging out with the stoners. Who was ever having the party that day I'm with.
On that specific note, I remember I would go to Cerritos High School. I was assigned to Cerritos High School, and I would check in the homeroom. Then my next class was auto body. And once I got to auto body, I would run out the back gate and go to this park across the street from Cerritos High School. I think it was called Freedom Park. And we go over there and we get high. That's all my life consisted of. Going over there, finding somebody to get high with, go to a party, go to a ditching party, and chill. And that was kind of my half cholo, half stoner days. I remember that. And that was like, I didn't have a care in the world. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about any of that. I just didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. I later educated myself, but in school, no, I wasn't with it. I wasn't with staying in there all day and having to walk home all the way from Cerritos High School to Carmenita and Artesia, which is about 1.5 miles. I hated that walk. So here we go.
Well, what's a typical day like then? You sleep late?
Get up mid-morning, get high with whoever comes over the house. Because my house is meeting place central.
Yeah.
Find out what's happening during the day and go to that place and party. Be it stoner parties or the cholo parties, we're there. I mean, that's part of the life. And then you're just going out with girls, enjoying girls at that point in time.
Staying up late at night.
Staying up late at night, all out. It's just pretty much a normal teenage,
Now,
abnormal
what's your dad
teenage life.
saying at this point, though? Like, get your ass out of bed? I mean,
Well, he is. I mean, he's really trying
you're
to
resisting him?
get me to go to work, and I'm resisting him, and he's catching me loaded, and he's really upset with my utilizing drugs. I mean, he would get me and sit me in the house in front of him and maybe sit there and watch me so I wouldn't go out and use dope. I smoked weed. He caught me with drugs a few times, and I got the belt a few times for, being high, and it's just like a normal father, he didn't know what to do with me after that. I mean, it's to the point where he doesn't know how to control me now. I'm uncontrollable now.
I look back at that, I reflect on that, and it makes me sad. Because my dad tried everything he could. He didn't know what to do. I remember he used to sit me down. He had me read a book one time. I was stoned. And he had me read a book called As a Man Thinketh. And I remember one quote from that book. It's, as a man thinketh, so shall he be. That's what I remember from that book. And it's kind of like the power of your self-talk, right? As you think, that is what you are. And I carried that throughout my entire life, right? That was one lesson my dad gave me during a period when I was stoned. And he sat me down and said, you read this book right here. And he didn't know what else to do with me. I was so rebellious. And I look back and I wish I could have been that son that, that brought in good grades, that did good, that I was a letterman and played sports. I just wasn't. I wasn't that guy. And it kind of makes me sad to think that, I disappointed my pop, And I'm just glad he got to see the change in me later in life.
I mean, not in terms of violence or attitude. I'm just going to sneak out the window if I can or go with my friends, even if he tells me no. I mean, I got to this point, so I think he got to a point in life where he thought if I was at home, it was going to be okay. But he never condoned the use of drugs. Neither did my mom. I mean, they got to the point where they want to be home rather than on the streets. And if the homeboys came over in the garage and we drank beer and smoked weed, then they did not like it. And my dad, if my dad came outside, we put the joints out quick. But my mom, we'd just go ahead and, we'd continue smoking. My mom was a little bit permissive in that respect. But my dad, it was like we wouldn't do anything in front of him. But they figured if we were out at the home and we were in the garage and we weren't out in trouble in the streets, then it was okay. And I guess that's the way they managed to maintain a little bit more or exercise a little bit more control upon me. But they were always opposed to my using drugs. I mean, I always remember that
I remember these times. Yeah, my dad hated drugs. He hated them. And my mom was kind of permissive, we were smoking weed. I think their belief was like, he's home, he's safe. He's here with us. Because I was carrying guns at this time. My mom caught me with guns. My dad caught me with guns. I was in a gang. They knew I was in a gang. They had already shot at the house. Wine Gardens had come by. Joe Licon, a couple other guys came by and shot at my house. Joe Licon, that's an old name from Wine Gardens. They came by and they shot at our house, and I was almost hit by a round. I was in my room. I was a kid, right? Really a kid. And I was standing next to the wall, and I saw part of the wall. It was like the plasterboard the houses are made of, the new houses. It had that, and I saw the dust fly out, and I heard pow, 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 and I saw little holes going through my wall. And I knew exactly what it was. So I ran to my dad's room and I said, they're shooting. My dad ran out with a gun. And he called the police. He didn't know what else to do. He called the police. And all the homeboys were okay. They missed everybody in the house. And we had holes in our water heater because they hit the water heater. And we had holes in my bedroom wall. That's where the bullets went through. And I think their belief was that if I stayed there, I'd be safe. And I wasn't on the streets being a hooligan and participating in gang violence. So they tried their best to keep me under wraps at home. I mean, I always remember that my father was constantly preaching, stay away from the hoodlums. You dress like a bum. You look like a clown with those big cholo pants. Do not wear those things. Come to work with me. You got a job. You don't have to do these things. Those guys that you're hanging out with are no good. And in retrospect, I come to realize certain things that my dad said were true. He knew that these guys were no good, that these guys were bad for me. And later in life, I went to prison. He told me something. It was before I got this life sentence. So we sat down and we're talking. This is when we started to be friends. He's come to visit me and stuff. He's visited me all throughout my life in prison. And we're getting close here. He brought my son up to visit me. And he told me a lesson. He says, you know what, the president of Mexico, Benito Juarez, once said, el respeto a lo ajeno es la paz. And that means, translated in English, respect for the people and their things is peace. I didn't understand that at the time. I didn't have any grasp. So let me stop that right there. It's el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. That's Benito Juarez. It's like the respect for people and the property is peace. And I think what my dad was trying to instill in me was like respect people, respect laws, and respect their things, right? Because that's peace. Because when people give you that respect in return, it's peace. You have no worries. You're not violating anybody's rights. You're not breaking the laws. It was a simple man, but he was a very intelligent man. My father was very intelligent. And I think it's one of the things that drove me towards wanting to learn. My dad never got a degree, but he started his own businesses, was an entrepreneur. And I always admired that in him. He grinded, and he made the dream come true. It's okay, Dad. I remember the quote. Somehow I just remembered that out of all the things he told me. He taught me that. And I remembered it. And years later, after I defected, I knew what that meant. Just like a year ago, I sat back and I said, this is what it really means. To respect other people and their things. It's peace. To leave people alone and be left alone. That's peace. I told him about that one day on the phone. I told him, Dad, I remember what you told me as a kid, years ago. He says, he told me that when I was a kid. He told me before I got sentenced, and there's another saying he had, similar to this one. But this is the one that stuck in my mind, the one by Benito Juarez. But I understood it, and a lot of things he told me. I mean, he wasn't the perfect father. I mean, obviously, all men are fallible. But he was a good father. He's a good man. I think my dad is one of the finest men I know. So, I mentioned earlier in this interview that my father would visit me everywhere, and he would, faithfully. Every Wednesday, he'd come to see me in the county jail. We'd get off of work and he'd come and see me, and we'd sit and talk. You know, he'd leave me some money. I love my dad. My dad loved me, and he'd follow me everywhere. Every person I went to, he would follow me. He came to visit me at the Bay. He came to visit me at other prisons, and he would bring my son Bobby, because I set my son Bobby to live with him. I had my son Bobby living with my mom, and Bobby started getting into trouble at school, started smoking cigarettes, started combing his hair back, the path. And that was in the heart of White Fence. She lived on Whittier and Euclid, right in those little ghetto apartments right there. And I don't know if they're still there, but that's where she lived, right across the street from Euclid Elementary School. And my son went to Euclid Elementary School, and he was embroiled in hanging out with people, right, and getting into trouble. And I made a decision that was heartbreaking for my mother, because I had him living with my mother. I had custody of my son Bobby. Even when I was incarcerated, my wife gave me custody. My ex-wife, excuse me. And I thought the best thing for my son, the best possible scenario would be to send him with my dad. And my dad had a ranch up in Alfreda, Arizona. And I sent him out there. And it's the best decision I could ever make for my son. And it was heartbreaking for my mother, I understand that, but it's the best thing I could do for my son.
You know, he's always done the right thing. He's always provided for his family. He's always worked hard. Really close with my dad. And
What about this drug use and stuff? Did it affect your siblings, your younger siblings?
my little brother became a drug user. My sisters never used drugs. Never, ever. Never used
Is that
drugs.
how he got AIDS?
My older brother?
The one who has AIDS?
Yeah, I think it's through IV drug user with his wife, because his wife died recently from HIV. So I think that's what it was, his wife.
She was a user too.
She was a user too, yeah. So he's terminally ill, and it was through drug use. Had to be through drug use. So, yeah, so drugs affected my family deeply, I guess. I mean, it affected my little brother. My little brother went to prison after me. I went to prison after my brother Mark, who went to prison for robbery. So all three of the brothers went to prison. And my sisters never went to prison. My brother John, now he's doing great. My younger brother, he's a surgical tech out in Nevada. He's doing great. He's got 5 kids. He's doing good. He's doing good. I mean, he's straightened himself up. He went to joint for, I think, a 4 or 5 year sentence. He did a little bit on that, and he got out and just started flying right. I think he started backsliding at one point where he was using drugs, and then he just straightened himself up before he got loose. And now he's doing great. He's going to school. He's surgical tech. I think he's going to try to get his degree or certification for I guess the position that he has for the hospital he's working with. I know he trained at Martin Luther King. And Mark, he's just son.
Yeah, my little brother John, he flew right. You know, he's a regular Joe, regular citizen. He's moved on, he's living life. You know, he's living life, and I'm happy for him. He never went back to prison. He was just a drug user, never a gang member. He just used drugs. That was his thing. You know, he never became a homeboy. He never committed an act of violence. Just wasn't him. He was just a stoner dude whose brothers were dope fiends, and so he started using dope. But he broke free of that, and I am so happy. I am so happy for him. I'm glad he moved on with his life.
Permanent disability now, Social Security. He comes and visits me here. And last time I had seen him was in Folsom in 1985. As a matter of fact, it was that long, 1985, 17 years. I hadn't seen my brother. I hadn't touched him in 17 years. Then when I got sentenced for my life sentence, I seen him in court. He was sitting in the audience. And I talked to him a few times on the phone. But I hadn't touched my brother in 17 years. The last time I seen him was in 85. I was in Folsom State Prison. I was a tier tender on the tier. And I remember I was walking on a tier, and I'm walking by a cell. A guy had just committed suicide in this cell that my brother moved into, and I just went in there and cleaned it up. The guy had written his goodbye note on the wall, "Perdóname Dios," and then something else about some girl. I forgot what he wrote about some girl. I think it's.
I remember this story. There was a guy on the tier. I was a tier tender in Folsom Shoe. They would let 2 cardenales out on every tier, right? And we would be the porters or the janitors for the tier. We'd feed, we'd do the whole 9 yards. We'd clean up the hot trays and the hot cart. We'd mop, we'd do all that stuff. Then we'd kick it on the tier all day. Well, this one guy was on the tier, some paisa. he kept telling us over and over, hey man, I got this letter about this girl, she's trying to cross me up. And it was me and Wino Grajeda. Wino Grajeda was there with me. We were reporters together. And he was a carnal. I was just made. And I stopped and talked to the guy over and over and over, maybe 3 or 4 times. I told him, hey, no te preocupes, nada va a pasar. And Wino told him the same thing. No te preocupes, nada va a pasar. And this dude would stop us every time we went by. And finally we got pissed off at him. Told me, hey, we don't want to hear it no more. And right after that, this dude hung himself in the cell with a television cable. Because in the back of the Folsom cells, they had a locker in the back of the wall above the toilet and the sink. Tiny little cells, right? Above that locker that was lengthwise, right? The foot locker, it's kind of like a stand-up thing, right? But they would screw it into the wall lengthwise to cover the width of the cell. Above that was a little round vent where your cable went through, your television cable, if you were fortunate enough to have a cable. Well, he pulled it through and looped it and hung himself off of it. He had soaped up the sink and greased it up so his feet couldn't get a purchase on the sink after he put the noose around his neck, and he hung himself. He died. He died in that cell, and he wrote this long missive on the wall. Perdóname Dios. He wrote about this girl. He did a sign of the cross on the wall. And I remember we had to go in there and clean up the cell. We had to cut the cable and all that stuff, right? It was still like knotted up. Part of it was clipped where they cut it off his neck. And we had to clean that writing off the wall, clean the sink, and swept it out. And lo and behold, my brother arrives from Chino State Prison. He was in deep seg with Big Joe Morgan. And he loved Big Joe. And Joe used to play cards with him, treated him good. He knew he was my brother. And he confirmed to me, one day we're talking, and he said, yeah, Joe cheats. I said, yeah, I know he cheats in pinochle. Because that's all they do is play pinochle and talk, right? And I said, yeah, I know Joe cheats. I caught him one day. And he said, yeah, that guy cheats, man. He cheats in cards. But I hadn't seen my brother in 17 years, right? I hadn't seen him. I'd been to prison. He went to prison. And I was doing 8 years. And he had did a prison stretch before that. And I walked down the tier and I see him. He says, hey, dude, what's up? I don't even recognize him. I said, what is it you want? He had been moved into the cell where this guy just committed suicide. And he says, hey. And I said, what? And then I see the tattoo on his neck. He had 2 roses where he covered up his wife's name. And I looked at him and I said, what the hell are you doing here? My brother Mark, right? Here I am, a Mexican Mafia member, just got into the organization, and my brother drives up. And it was the biggest worry for me. I always had to take care of him. I was always worried he was going to get into a jam, or I didn't want him involved in the violence. I wanted him so far removed from that. And I just remember being happy, but kind of apprehensive that he was there as well.
I wrote about some girl, I think it's the cause of his suicide. Some girl had broken his heart or something of that nature. But just so happens, my brother just drove up to Folsom that day from Chino. He was in Chino with Joe Morgan, and I'm walking by the cell, and he says, hey, I'm walking with Wino Grajeda. I'm where the tier tenders on that chair. I just made my bones. I was just became a Mexican Mafia member. And I stop and I say, what do you want? And I'm standing right here in bars with him. He says, hey. I said, yeah, what's up? I don't even recognize my own brother. He says, it's me. And I seen the tattoo on his neck, his little rose right here, and I seen it. I says, hey, it's you. What the heck you doing here? I got him and I hugged him through the bars and I shook his hand. And really, really powerful moment for us. I mean, I hadn't seen my brother in years, and then I seen him then. And I stood with him for about a year right there.
Was he a gangster too?
He's a camarada. He's put in work for the mob. He's done a few hits. As a matter of fact, they wanted to make him at one point in time. Back in 1987, right before I paroled. Puppet Baez. You remember Puppet? Sure. And when they died, Puppet wanted to sponsor him for membership.
Yeah, they sent wire to me. I was somewhere. I can't remember where. Oh, I was fighting my murders. And Mark was in Folsom, New Folsom, with Puppet and Angel and all those guys. He was with all those guys. And Puppet wanted to sponsor him. And Puppet was like the king of Florencia. That was the real king of Florencia, not these other guys. And I remember they sent a message to me, and I said no. I said no, I don't want him to be made, right? Number one, I knew my brother. He wasn't a killer. He wasn't a violent guy. And number two, I knew he was a heroin addict. His addiction would get him in a jam. And the one thing I wanted to prevent was my brother getting in a jam over drugs. I didn't want him involved in the organization. I already had some inkling that I was going to leave the organization. I knew that early on. And I didn't want him involved. And it caused a huge rift between us. He was upset with me for shooting him down. Years later, in this very room right here, I had a visit with my brother, and he told me, why did you shoot me down? And I told him, I said, because I knew I was going to do this. I says, and I told her, I said, bro, you're not a killer. I says, you got to whack people. You know, if you're going to be in this, and I know that's not in you. I know that's not in you. And I remember he saw me start crying. He was just happy that I was out. He was happy that I was out of the organization. In fact, my brother would go to the yard, even when he went back to prison after I locked up. He was on the yard with carnales, multiple carnales. And that's what I mean about the organization not targeting family. Mark was a good dude to them. I was the one responsible for locking up and debriefing. And that's the way the organization thinks. Even today, even with the new blood and the new generation and all the influences that they have, they do not target family members. They just don't. You know, it's always been the definition of the organization. And it's one thing that separates them from other organizations, right? Because the AB will whack out your own family. And I don't know what the Norteños do and the Nuestra Familia does, but I know the Italian Mafia does it too. But the Mexican Mafia will not do that. I think part of that is because they know they have families too. You know, it's not a secret where their wives and family members and sisters and brothers are at. And I think if they start whacking out the family members of dropouts, they might get a little taste of their own medicine in return. But more importantly, I think it's the moral fiber that if the organization has moral fiber, if any exists in the organization, it's that. They don't target civilians. And Mark wasn't a civilian. Mark was a gangster. He was subject to get hit, but they did not hit him. They did not hit him because that's just not done in the organization. At least in my time it wasn't. And I think for a large part it's still not done.
They wrote me from New Folsom where Mark was housed, and they wanted to make him.
Man, we got into a lot there. That's behind the scenes. So that's what I love about these videos. But I really appreciate you guys listening to these because it gives me the opportunity to let you know what I was thinking at the time and what I think now.